So tonight's lineup at the Active Travel Cafe, we will be starting with our usual crowdsourced news update. And following this, we have two speakers. Firstly, Eugene Minogue, who is Interim Director of Play England, and he's going to talk to us about urban planning, children's active travel, and about the work that he's doing with Play England to support this. And then we have our very own Ranty Highwayman, who will take us through self-explaining street layouts. So I think we'll move straight on to the news section. And does anybody have anything they would like to share with us this week? Is anything happening in your neighbourhood, or is there anything sort of nationally that you'd like to raise everybody's attention, raise awareness of? Adam, you've got a hand up.
This is going to be a bit cheeky. Mark, are you happy for those slides that you shared in on the regional contacts for Active Travel England to be shared?
I was just about, that's what my hand is raised. I was just about to.
I'm going to raise my hand down.
I was just about to say that, but you beat it.
What was that, Mark? Do you want to?
Okay, so Adam preempted me. So last week, I've been off for 2 weeks, sadly, for bereavement leave. My mum died a couple of weeks ago, so I've been out of everything. So if you discuss things, I won't know what's been happening recently. But I did break my leave to go to an IHE webinar with Active Travel England last week, which they gave a presentation about their regional work, and they shared a slide. They didn't say in that meeting, "Oh, this is secret," or "Don't show anyone this slide." So I'm assuming if they didn't say that then yeah, go ahead. So they had a slide showing all the regional contacts for ATE for their areas, and a presentation. And no, there was definitely nothing that said this is confidential. So.
Well, you're very welcome to share that in the chat if that's possible. Then I think we have had somebody before share contacts. So, and I think if you contact them via their general email address, it goes to those regional contacts. So.
Oh no, it's just the names. It's not got their email addresses. So yeah. It's just a slide. It's a map of the country with who is which area. But you can work out what their email addresses are, obviously. Adam, if you've got it and can share it in an easier way, it's probably easier.
Well, I think he's done that. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, he's done it. Yeah, thank you. That was my hand as well. So
I'm really sorry to hear about you, Mum. Roxanne, you got a hand up. You're on mute. No, she can't talk. I'll take Sally.
Yeah, it's a good lead in from the last one, because I live in Weybridge. I'm a fairly new sort of active travel campaigner, and the Weybridge Society is fighting an appeal against a parcel distribution centre that's that somebody wants to put on an office park, wants to convert it to a parcel distribution centre on the edge of town. And we've been fighting it on the grounds of safety and unsuitability. We already have 3 parcel distribution centres, and by going through all the Active Travel England guidance and the local transport plans and the LC whips, I've discovered that this is right in the middle of a active travel walking corridor. So it seems to me that you shouldn't be putting a parcel distribution centre in the middle of an active travel sort of corridor. And I'm just interested to know whether anybody else has come across sort of active travel issues that really do sort of challenge the Active Travel England guidance really does challenge the viability of this scheme. So that would I was wondering if there are regional reps, could I maybe
I think that is something that you could definitely write and ask about. So I can see Mark just waved there. Did you have a more?
Yeah, I mean, not to disagree strongly with what you said, but Brian always said, and it was reiterated, the functions of the regional reps are to liaise with local authorities. Their remit expressly says we are not there to deal with stakeholders. So, right. And Brian said, you can write to me and I will read what you've written, but don't expect me to tell you whether I'm going to do anything with it. What you'll know is by my actions or by our actions if we've done something with it or not. but we are expressly told we're not there to be a stakeholder, a group.
The thing that bothers me is that I get the impression that the Highway Authority doesn't, from the contact we've had and what we've seen that they've produced, they don't seem to be aware of their obligations now of the Active Travel England guidance.
Speak to me offline because I'm working with Surrey.
Okay, right. Thank you very much.
And yeah, perhaps some other people might have some ideas that they could post in the chat. That would be really great. Thank you. Roxanne, have we got you?
Better luck this time. Sorry about that. I'd clicked on that slide in the chat and it just blocked everything. Anyway, a slightly cheeky one. Today is the launch of the Christmas challenge. It's Giving Tuesday, and so I know that there are lots of cycling campaigns and cycling related charities that are fundraising, including CamCycle and Cyclox, and donations made today and for the next few days will be doubled. So anyone from our communities or even further afield, the work done in Cambridge, Oxford, and hopefully anywhere else, if you could put it in the chat, then we'll know. It benefits all of us. So if you're looking for somewhere to make a donation and make the most of it, please consider our charities. Thank you. And also, if you're not part of the Big Give, it's a really, really good way to raise funds for campaigning. So do feel free to reach out to me if you'd like some advice in future years.
Thank you, Roxanne. That's great. Hope you get a bit more support for that. Steve.
Going well so far.
Very good. Give now. A quick one. It's not active travel, but it is key to getting cars off our roads and making active travel easier, which is buses. And just flagging, if anybody's missed it, there was a really, really good Friends of the Earth report came out last Thursday showing absolutely epic bus decline across Britain, everywhere apart from London. So there you go. It's really, really worth reading. And I know people on this platform are really keen on a lovely data visualization. So this amazing interactive map where you can see how well or badly your borough is performing. So I'll put a link in the chat, Sally, but it's well worth checking that out.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I had a quick look at it. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And Bob.
Hi. Couple of things. First of all, about consultation in London about collision investigation. Amy Aaron Thomas is here. She will put up a link for those of you to respond. It's important to respond to this consultation if you're in London or travel in London. Also, don't forget 2 weeks yesterday, December the 11th, it's the 30th anniversary webinar for Road Danger Reduction Forum commemorative conference, and not enough of you have actually signed up. I must point out that although it's in the afternoon, you don't actually have to attend, but if you sign up through Eventbrite, you can see the recording afterwards, so you don't actually have to be there at 2 o'clock. But please, please do sign up to the Eventbrite link, and I'll put that in the post up in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. That's great. Yes. Robin.
Yes, so 2 bits of news from Oxford. Actually, I'll make it 3. So well, sort of one of the first ones. So Alison Hill, who the chair of Cyclox, got hit by a coach a few weeks ago. She's out of hospital now, which is good, and recovering. I went to see her yesterday. She is actually well on the mend for someone in her 70s. She's for a regular cyclist, you might expect she's very fit. And we had a very good little lunchtime session talking about next steps in campaigning and things. She's very much mentally active and on the case and looking forward to getting more involved. So she's in very good spirits. And as she just mentioned, the big give that Cyclox are doing is thank you for that plug, Roxanne. The other things is Oxfordshire should have yesterday submitted its rebid to the Active Travel Fund 4. We missed out in the original round we've managed to negotiate a second chance and have got 4 schemes going in under that. And I've managed to get some last-minute co-production sort of at the end of last week, thanks to an address to the cabinet. So hopefully those will go through in reasonably good order. One of the offices has done some really good work on them, so I think the one in the market town near me was looking very good. And good news on buses. Our first couple of electric buses have arrived. The first 2 are actually on the Brookes University route. So Brookes University sponsor a route that obviously goes from the centre to their campus and out to the park and ride. And those electric buses are up and running. And the full official launch of them is going to be in January. We're getting 159 in all, which is enabled by the coming traffic filters scheme, which is a bit like an LTN but writ large. It's a large and complicated scheme which I won't go into now, and controversial, but I can maybe tell you about that another day. It should be implemented round about November next year.
Great, thank you, Robin. And really good to see that Alison's on the mend. So that's quite a kind of nasty, shocking thing to happen. Will.
Hello there. We're running into a few problems in Essex at the moment because of the, I don't know if any Essex County Council people are here with us, but they seem to be adopting a very lackadaisical approach towards LTN 120. I know Mark knows Colchester fairly well, but I've posted an illustration of a junction in the chat. We've got, this is currently a large roundabout called St Botolph's with a pedestrian subway system through the middle of it. And they went to the government and said, look, we need to modernise this for active travel. And they came up with a plan for a light controlled crossroads. However, their initial consultation came and went, and then they've come back with this kind of squashed roundabout, which gives a little bit of pedestrian space, but not much, and not much in the way of cyclists. And it doesn't look like there's much in the way of LTN 120 crossings or anything like that. But I'm just wondering whether anyone else is running into this problem where they've got the county council allegedly on side, but they're not delivering. I mean, we've had £4 million on, I think it was ATF 1, which has just been drained away. Nothing really much has come of it at all, basically because it all went in consultation and altering plans. So I'm just wondering what other people's experience, please.
Does anyone have anything to respond to Will's? No.
On a somewhat smaller scale, but with regard to crossings where pedestrians and cyclists should have priority, we've still got Surrey County Council are creating junctions, new junctions, still giving cars priority and indicating that pedestrians and cyclists should stop. I've mentioned it to a number of people.
Yeah, I think all these things are things that you can raise with Active Travel England. I know that, as Mark said, you're not necessarily going to hear anything back, but if they don't, they can't possibly know everything that's going on all over the country, and they are probably to some extent, reliant on, what is put in front of them. So I guess it doesn't hurt to do that. Any other ideas? Please put them in the chat for Will. I don't know, Adam, whether Adam and somebody else had a hand up. They've gone there.
Answer him.
Matthew, whether either of you have anything to say.
The only thing I would say on that, I also put my hand up for something else, but the active travel capability scoring, that's probably a route through which you can probably address the systemic issues within your highways in terms of training. It sounds more like a training issue and a lack of skills issue rather than anything else. And you're not going to fix it by shouting about a specific scheme. You're much better going in and saying, well, you're never going to get your active travel capability score above to a 3 or whatever you're aiming for, unless your engineers know what they're doing, and they clearly don't. How do you, when are you training them? Where's your training budget? But that's, I wouldn't worry too much about what they're spending the money, how to spend it on. It's what's coming down the line, and that's and getting those officers trained up. Yeah. I mean, we had one in Baines where we were kind of haranguing them to train up their officers, and one officer, high up officer, said, "Well, if you train them up, they'll leave." So, but you know, that's kind of where we are. We want to give them the skills to be able to do this.
Thanks, Adam. I'll take Matthew and Robin, and then we'll move on to the speaker session, part of the session. Robin, sorry, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sally. Just a reflection on engineers who've been rewarded by keeping their jobs for doing what's popular with the status quo rather than pushing boundaries. So again, probably reflecting what's said already, you need to support them as much as you can, show them good examples, show them that this completely average town has done something that's not phenomenal, not too scary, but just mundane, and it's worked and it's safe. No one's died, no one got sacked, no one got sued. Similarly, again, reflecting on Active Travel England, we've been working through an LC whip scheme, something I've been working on for over 10 years. It's an Active Travel England have come in and they've been very much the voice of reason. So where local engineers have tried to bend the rules too far or suggest it doesn't matter, no one will notice, Active Travel England have come in and they've actively, apologies, told them, no, that you need to look at that again. It's not good enough. Some filtered side roads are going in because the vehicle turning radius and the turning speeds were not considered safe enough for those people walking and cycling along the main route. So things that I've asked for and been told were beyond the pale, they're now hearing from a respected source and going, okay, we do need to do that, otherwise we won't get the money. So just support your officers, but point out where they could be losing money and losing credibility.
I think that's a really good point. And also, actually, you know, where your counsellors come into this too. And it might be just that you raise it with them and you say, do you know that, you know, have you asked them, are your officers talking to Active Travel England about their schemes? And do you know that?
Sorry, point of clarification, I am actually an officer. I am actually a counsellor, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. But I think you know, this is a role that counsellors, you know, and as campaigners, you can go to counsellors and, you know, particularly if it's a cabinet member and say, you know, can you find out, are they? Because they don't necessarily have the expertise, you know, to judge, and they may not even really be aware of this. So I guess that's something else that people can try. Thank you, Matthew. Robin?
Yeah, so I was going to say, without wishing to open the whole discussion, there's a whole. I think we could all probably look at examples where a council has said we want to follow the standards and then hasn't fully delivered them. So then there's a whole set of judgments about how close to the full standards delivery is good enough, and we've had plenty of discussions and debates on here about how close is good enough, because sometimes there are reasons why you can't quite get there, involving funding, amount of road space, all kinds of reasons, and that's what I don't want to get into. But I think you have to judge it and judge when and where you want to take action. But certainly the point about praising good results and encouraging good results rather than doing too much criticizing of bad results is generally what we found to be the most successful approach. Although you can't just do that, because you do still have to nudge it in the right direction. It's a difficult balance, and there's never necessarily a completely right answer.
Thanks, Robin. Roxanne, you will be absolutely the last person, and then we will move on. Go on.
Sorry for taking two turns. I just thought I'd share news of a campaign here in Cambridge. It's not CamCycle, it's another group in Cambridge, but I work with them as well, called Mill Road for People. And they've launched a pavement for people campaign where they're encouraging local residents to report all the cars that are parked on the pavement. And they're sort of gathering that in bulk to take to the police and the local authority to get action taken. They're making reports and just trying to get some more enforcement, etc. I thought I would share that because I thought it might be interesting to others. So there's a link in the chat. And I see that Councillor Scott from Edinburgh's here today. And Councillor Scott, they would love it if you could come and talk to them so they could learn more about how Edinburgh got to where you are with enforcing pavement parking. So I'll send you a DM and hopefully we can work something out too. Anyway, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Roxanne. Yeah, we're all really looking forward to seeing how Scotland in general gets on with the pavement parking. So we'll move on to first speaker slot tonight, and I am delighted to have Eugene Minogue here, who is Interim Executive Director of Play England. He's going to talk about urban planning, children's active travel, and his work with Play England. Eugene has 25 years experience working in the play and sports sector. He's wants to work with government departments and strategic partners such as Active Travel England. So I think it's really important that we are kind of more aware of the work that he's doing in Play England. And we've had a number of people come and talk about urban planning and children's active travel and children's play. So this is really, another kind of way of trying to look at sort of how we can join the dots, really. And so I'll hand over to you, Eugene. So Eugene's going to kind of run us through what he's doing, and then we'll have time for questions. Over to you. Is he there? I can't see him. This is the trouble with the... Oh, there he is. We can't hear you, though.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear now. Great.
Yeah. Pressing 2 buttons. No, thanks for having me. I want to try and keep it informal and conversational as we can, and I'm going to do a little bit of scene setting. So apologies if I'm teaching anybody to sort of suck eggs, and tell you some things you already know. Probably just remind you of your playful childhood as we sort of go through a bit of my ramblings, and then talk about a really important inquiry which has just been launched at a call for evidence, which dovetails nicely into the strategic direction of travel at Play England. So Play England, we're the national charity and representative body for Play in England. We have the equivalents, obviously, in the various sort of home nations across the UK as well. So particularly here to speak in a English context. Primarily, some of it does overlay with the UK and others. So just in terms of a bit of scene setting, so you can sort of put the pieces of the jigsaw together as I sort of go through. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is about the rights of the child and where that should be positioned within our current system, and then outline some glaring gaps that need addressing across that, and then what steps we're certainly taking as Playing them, with certainly welcome support from others, both individuals and organisations, local authorities, anybody really. So in 1980, the UNCRC was declared, or the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child, and it declared the right of play was a critical human right. That comes under Article 31. There are other rights within there, including the right of the child to be heard. So this was sort of declared in 1980. The UK is a signatory to the UNCRC. So Article 31 specifically creates a right for all children to have rest, leisure, and engage with play and recreational activities which are appropriate to their age, and for them to participate freely in cultural life and the arts. You can find out lots more about this just by Googling UNCRC, particularly 31, but you can get the whole list of the others, and I would encourage people to have a little look. Play is obviously fundamental to children and young people, but it's also good for people of all ages, and the well-being of particularly our children across England. So making sure that we bake play back into the very fabric of society, it's somewhat been lost. So to give you an example, I'm going to give you a oversimplification of an example here, but certainly a great-grandfather, not specifically my great-grandfather, typically had a free range of movement of around about 6 miles. That's how far they could go to go fishing, go out with their friends, cycle, roam quite freely. The grandfather, so by the 50s, that had shrunk down to about 1 mile of free range of movement. The mother, so sort of back end of the 70s, just going into the 80s, we're talking about 1/2 mile. My children's generation, we're talking about line of sight. So the world, physical world, has got dramatically smaller for our children, particularly, and their free range of movement. But it has got much bigger digitally. I'm going to stay away for that for the purposes of today. But the physical world has shrunk somewhat in terms of how and where children can move. So we need to redress that blend. I don't like the term balance, I like the blend. Now, all of the stuff around that, there's various sort of different reasons. When you strip away all of the perceived reasons, the actual reason is primarily, but not exclusively, down to the dominance of the car and how we've built our society around the car. And obviously that's been affecting our children and young people and their ability to be able to play. And then that has consequences, particularly in later life, adolescence, teenage years, and then when they become adults. There's lots of research out there. There was a significant piece of research that we've done and launched on Play Day this year, which spoke about that free range of movement and how it's declined quite dramatically over recent decades, and how that is now impacting children's physical and mental health. But then also when they grow up, they carry that with them as well. So just as an example of that, in 1970, the percentage of primary school children travelling home from school alone was around about 86%, so very high. By 1990, that had decreased to 35%, and by 2010, we was down to below 25%. So it goes to show how that the world and the dominance of the car and building the infrastructure around the car has impacted, just children's journeys to school, and it's having a profound effect. 8 in 10 people aged 55 to 64, not quite that age, but 8 out of 10 people in that age group used to play outside their homes as a child. Today, less than 1 in 3 children regularly play outside. So if you was born like me in the 80s, you were typically the last generation to play out in the traditional way that we certainly used to. And again, this is through the ever shrinking of our society and the sort of, particularly the urban landscape. So there's lots of stuff out there that we want to bring to the fore around this and shine a light on children and young people, because they are an indicator species, as Tim Gill refers to it. So if we get the urban infrastructure right, particularly for children and young people, it tends to be right for those with reduced mobility, older people, and adults just more generally. So I'm going to lean into that as we sort of go through. Unfortunately, at local and national government level, particularly in England, they're simply not concerned enough that around children when it comes to urban planning and how that restrictions that children are growing up under are now impacting us as a society. So to give an example, the National Planning Policy Framework is very weak when it comes to children and young people. There's only one reference in the NPPF currently around children and young people, and that relates to homes. You contrast that to statutory protections that are in place around bats and newts. It's a shameful position for us to be in a society whereby we've got statutory protection for bats and newts, none for our children within the National Planning Policy Framework, and that desperately needs addressing. And hopefully the inquiry, which I'll talk about in a little bit, will help address that. There's obviously been lots of movements recently with the emergence of things like play streets, street play sessions, school streets. But again, a lot of these are misunderstood or often polarized out in communities, as opposed to prioritizing children and young people in the way that they probably need to. Loads of stuff around LTNs and the merits for and against those as well. 20-minute or 15-minute neighbourhoods or cities, whichever you may want to refer to it as. But play has a transformative and particularly a protective factor. So if we build spaces and places for children and prioritise those through our urban planning, we actually get a much richer experience out in our urban landscape. And that's something that we want to see more of. And that's why we're working with statutory bodies such as Sport England, who have some really good guidance around their active environments guidance, which is getting better and evolving, and obviously Active Travel England, who have recently got statutory consultee status in a similar fashion to what Sport England have had for a while. Hence why we're working with those statutory partners to improve that and bring children right to the fore of their thinking, and also use the leverage that they've currently got, and hopefully some future ones that they may get in the future. So when we start looking at population health indicators for play, there's a whole range of different things out there over and above just getting children moving and active around the urban landscape, and how transformative that can be. Once we accept the value as play as an outcome, there's loads of indicators that we can then start looking at, and these can include various sort of different things. What age do children come out and be allowed out to play in certainly the way that I did as a child? Well, how long do they spend outside, and what the regularity of that is? The number and the range of spaces and places that children are seen in and are playing in. It's wrongly got to the point where it's assumed that children only play in playgrounds. They don't, nor should they just solely play in playgrounds. Particularly outside their front door in their communities, is certainly something we would like to see a lot more of. There's various sort of other indicators you can pick up as you go through, and again we're working with urban planners to start thinking about these things. There are some very good organisations out there. Arup particularly have got some very good guidance of how to build children and young people into the planning process, and active travel schemes. I'd also point people to the Urban 95 Academy, very good program run by the London School of Economics and the Bernard Lee Foundation, and it's all around seeing the urban landscape through the average height of a 4-year-old, hence 95 centimeters. So it's something real visually focused, but also can change your mindset around what you do with it all. So making sure that play is baked in, and children and young people are front and center, has wider sort of benefits as they grow older through their lifespan. Particularly physically is the obvious one, social one, their creative skills, they're cognitively more switched on, and emotionally as well more switched on. Play is ideal for developing these skills. It supports people in the ways that we explore the urban environment, we engage with it, and how we engage with each other. So it's fundamental that we get back to that. There's lots of research that we've put out there. There's lots that you can freely find on our social medias, particularly my LinkedIn, and also on Play England's LinkedIn as well, so you can get all the links from there. But just a breakdown in people's sort of interactions in their neighbourhoods. Again, that changed dramatically over a number of years, particularly because, again, the amount of people that live across the road from each other and don't know each other, or their children don't play with each other, certainly in the way that we used to. So what's the answer to this? In part, it's around play sufficiency legislation. And that's something that has been in place for almost over a decade in Wales. They've recently introduced it in Scotland. That's something that we are unequivocally calling for here in Play England for the next government to introduce. What does that mean? So it's around making sure that we have statutory legislation in place. Even that itself is quite damning, that we've got to a point where we're calling for government to introduce legislation for children to be able to play and to be considered within the national planning policy framework, as an example, but also a statutory duty on local authorities to make sure that they plan for this. So we want to make sure through the introduction of play sufficiency legislation that it brings the UNCRC child right to play and recreation into meaningful practice. We're calling for this legislation to build upon what has already been put in place in Scotland and Wales, but go further. So it should consist of 3 main areas, but not be limited to those 3 main areas. So spaces and places. So whether that's the street or right through to having a play park or a parklet, within their community, and parks and open spaces are going to be part of that as well. Making sure we cover the workforce through qualifications, registration and regulation, but also that we reintroduce play as provision, high quality, inclusive play services out in the communities, schools, across the public realm, whether that be hospitals or prisons or out in parks and open spaces, and holiday schemes as well. The introduction of play sufficiency legislation will ensure children, young people and families have enough meaningful access, time, space, opportunity, and more importantly, permission to play throughout all aspects of their daily life. With the legislation would then enable us and particularly local authorities to protect, provide, and enhance opportunities for play and recreation across all of those spheres, the public realm, right from the home all the way through to school and everything sort of in between. But it's also around having an ongoing process of research, action, repair, maintenance and enhancement. To do that, we've got to work with urban planners, we've got to work with civil engineers, all different parts of the local authorities that are involved in active travel or the public realm more broadly. So it isn't just a single sort of part of a local authority that we have to deal with. It is a broad sort of approach that we need to do. Leadership is desperately needed, hence why we're calling on the future UK government to sort of introduce this, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder with that. Just to give that a bit more context as to why we're calling for that, it's not that England is woefully lagging behind Scotland and Wales. There was a report published by Save the Children in September this year in the lead up to the COVID inquiry. 3 sort of main recommendations from that report. You know, the headline from it was: the government failed to consider children and young people's needs during the pandemic, particularly their need for outdoor play, physical activity, and social contact. So the 3 recommendations that they made for that was a national play strategy. Again, this is something Play England is working on. A clear ministerial lead for children and young people. I think we can ask for that on many things at the moment, but certainly for children and young people, that would be very much welcome. And then the 3rd recommendation was a play sufficiency duty on local authorities. So again, it's really timely from our perspective that the report landed. And around that, I did a BBC breakfast interview the month before in August, talking about play sufficiency legislation and where we need to be. The main bit that I wanted to draw people's attention to today, particularly, is several colleagues that I work with and others in and around children's play and physical activity have been lobbying the Levelling Up committee to launch an inquiry. Thankfully, that has just been announced. So there's going to be an inquiry looking at how better planning and building and urban design in England could enhance the health and well-being of children and young people. So the inquiry is now open and accepting evidence. So I'd strongly encourage anybody in this call, individually, part of your organisations or whoever it is, to submit evidence as part of that process. And they're looking at some key areas. So things like the experiences of children and young people and the built environment. They're looking at the planning system. Obviously, there's significant deficiencies in that need addressing. Best practice and evaluation. So if there are things that are going on out there that we can point to and share, whether that's here in the UK and or internationally, please do share it. The need for gross government working, and that's some of the things I've just spoke about. There isn't one governmental department that sits into, and the same with local authorities, it doesn't neatly fit into that. So closing dates for submissions is quite tight, 2nd of January. So please do get that. You can get the links directly from my social media or from Play England's social media as well. It is out there, so really sort of get it. And it's a really positive piece for us. So if we can get that, hopefully that will then lead into some significant change across the landscape and start seeing young people considered within the urban environment, both in terms of the built infrastructure, but also through the processes that lead to that, particularly getting their voice heard. So I'm conscious I've gone off on a bit, but there's a few bits that I've spoke about in this. For those of you that are interested, there's a couple of articles I did in the Planner magazine as well, so you can read some information in and around there as well. But yeah, happy to take some questions. I'm conscious I've spoke at people for a while now.
Thank you, Eugene. That was a really, really great run through. Both kind of, the desperate need that there is for doing more for children for play, but also some of the things that hopefully going to happen, and some actions that people can take. If you're able to post that in the chat, I don't know if you've done that already, that link to the call for evidence. Somebody else might be able to find it. And I guess for all of us here, we're not necessarily directly involved in thinking about children and play, but I wonder whether part of that call for evidence, if it is something around Active Travel England having a kind of more of a special focus on children, because I think currently there is a lot around schools, but it's very much the journey to school. And I think children are much more than their journey to school. And it does sort of start from the doorstep, really, and it does involve what's the function of your street, so I suppose with that in mind, I wondered whether how do we move from this idea that there are places for children, they go to parks, whatever, and perhaps they play on their street, but how do we kind of join the dots? Because obviously that whole idea of that permission isn't just about parents saying, oh, we have time, we can allow you to do this. It's very much predicated on it being safe and, kind of subjectively as well as objectively safe. And how do we join the dots? How is there a role that the play sufficiency could have in not only ensuring that there are places to get to, but that the sort of that the actual journey there is safe?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always this misperception straight away that whenever we talk about children and young people, that there's issues of safeguarding or safety that sort of come up. These things aren't insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. They're often overthought and overpresented or overemphasized. Certainly from our perspective, there is an inherent benefit in risk. And very recently, there was a new ISO standard, or an International Standards Organization standard, published on benefit risk assessment, not risk assessment. So this is around taking into account the inherent benefits that you get from risk. As a very practical example, the only way you can experience or truly learn to cross a road is to cross a road. Is there inherent risks in that? Yes. And those risks have always been there. But I think a lot of the time they're overstated just for particular reasons, and often it's to present a reason as to why not, as opposed to find a reason as to why do we do it. And often if you bring children into the planning process much earlier, you get some very unique insights in terms of how they perceive the world, and what needs to change, so that they can play a fuller part in the world that we're used to. And certainly when I was a kid, we used to just rule the streets. My mum used to kick us out and say, don't go back to the street lights are on, and we was out on our bikes, running around, playing Kirby, rounders, all sorts of stuff in the streets, and a lot of stuff that we probably should have been doing. But that's part of childhood and growing up. The problem is, at the moment, we want children to go to a place, as opposed to freely play in a space, predominantly, but not exclusively, their doorstep. And it's incumbent on us to do that. But the problem is, the blend has gone so far to the dominance of the car, we've forgotten how to do that, and then we start looking for reasons as to why not.
Yeah, lots of changes to be made. I'm going to take some questions, but I did notice that Lisa, you've got a hand up, but you've also put a question in the chat. I don't know if you would like to just speak.
Yeah, I can. And it's to remind people that the National Planning Policy Framework document, which is basically the law for building and developing, is currently being updated since last December, actually, when the government said that they were going to strengthen greenbelt laws. Lots of people are waiting for that for different a different reason. But there is the opportunity to get some text updated in that. If people lobby their MP right now, lots in the news at the moment about the forthcoming general election, and they might actually listen and do something if they think it's a vote winner. So if people angle it right, then we can push for change that way too.
Yeah, I would second that. There's a lot that could be done with that particular document. I'm going to take some of those questions in the chat. So thank you, Lisa. So somebody says the Vienna Conventions of the UN on traffic recognise a concept of a recreation zone where people on foot have the use of the whole road, and this being the legal basis of WUNFs and home zones. It's a recreation zones are not recognised concept in the UK and Irish traffic law. Last time I checked, in the UK and Ireland, home zone signs don't have the legal meaning in law that it does elsewhere. Is the next target for campaigns on changes in traffic law? I don't know if you know much about that, Eugene.
In terms of home zones and others, the main gripe that I have with the UK sort of traffic stuff is the misperception around play streets and street play. They are fundamentally two different things. So a play street, according to the law, is a permanent designation that in law designates that space a children's playground. Often what we see take place is street play. So that's a temporary road closure that's done typically 3 hours on an ad hoc basis, and the two get conflated. So we have permanent legislation here in the UK to facilitate play streets. Our home zones could be better from that perspective, but again, not widely used or understood, particularly by engineers from that perspective. But the whole thing does need updating. One of the things that I did do when I was at Westminster City Council was write their active streets policy, which gave very clear delineation between a permanent street play session and the school street, and uses different parts of the Road Traffic Act to make sure that sort of comes through very, very sort of clearly. So 116A, which is the temporary road closures, section 29 is the permanent designation, and then you can use either of those school streets as well, but most people use section 6. Again, they're a new sort of concept, but it would be certainly helpful if all of this was consolidated into something simple and much more practical to be able to do. You know, just as a throwaway additional sort of thing. It is far more complex for an adult to apply for a temporary road closure to facilitate a 3-hour road closure so their children can play out. Yet anybody can just rock up typically and park 2 tons of private property where they choose to do so.
Is
that right?
Yeah, a question leading on to that. I think the sort of permanent play streets legislation isn't used very often, I think, outside. I think it's used in London. It's not used much outside of London, if at all, that I know of. And is there guidance around that? It has been in the past, guidance, and I just wonder now. I think a lot of engineers are very risk averse, and they don't want to use this because they don't necessarily. I mean, is that a reason why?
There's lots of reasons as to why with it all. I think a lot of it is just a lack of understanding of the legislation, how it can be applied. Plus, it goes back to the point we was making, and often this is an oversimplification. People look for reasons as to why not, as to reasons as to why too. And that was one of the things that it took a significant period of time. But once we got a policy in place in Westminster, it was very clear around how that could be applied. I think also what hasn't helped over the last couple of years is where street play sessions has been confused with play streets. The outcome is, or the activity that takes place is very similar. How you get to that point is different in terms of that. So as an example, if you use section 29, it's a permanent designation. There's certain signage that go up 6-foot letters on the floor that says play street. A street play session is temporary road closure. But again, this is very similar to the world that I used to work in and still work in physical activity, sport, leisure, fitness, all of that. If you contrast it to GPs, typically a GP get around about 8 hours worth of training on the benefits of physical activity how much training do our urban planners, civil engineers, and others get on the benefits of children, or utilising the full suite of stuff that's out there? And again, the inquiry that's out at the moment, is that an opportunity for us to sort of put our stake in the ground and say, look, these things need simplifying so we can get more of this in the ground.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just seeing I've got a few more questions in the chat. Somebody has asked, is there a good place where data on reduced children's mobility is collected? And somebody else has asked, are there more challenging problems with girls than boys? If you can respond to both of those.
In terms of mobility, I'd need a little bit more context of what they mean by mobility, in terms of that. So whether that's free range of movement, or
yeah, I'm guessing that's kind of independent mobility, age at which trips are being
yeah,
there isn't.
It was on the reduced travel examples you gave earlier on.
The range of movement,
Range of movement, travel to school, part of it, but just because that's easier data that might be available, really.
I wouldn't say that there's a single place for it, but there is lots of pockets of stuff that's out there. That specific piece of research I was referring to was Dr. William Bird, that did a really good report which showed that, and it's often cited. It's in Tim Gill's book as well, Urban Playground, which I'd encourage people to buy and read if you can, with it on. Sorry, the second one I had on the tip of my tongue and I've lost it. What was the question?
Problems with girls and boys.
Girls, yes. I'm not going to speak for them, and you can look at this yourself. There is an amazing organisation called Make Space for Girls, which is highlighting all of the disparities that plague particularly women and girls when it comes to public realm, public spaces, but also infrastructure that is in the ground for children to play, particularly things like playgrounds, multi-use games areas, skate parks and stuff like that, because they are typically, not deliberately, but designed out because they don't yet have a voice within that system. And Make Space for Girls is shining a light on that, and rightly so, and really changing the landscape around it. But again, all of this we need to have fed into the place efficiency legislation, if we get it, to make sure that we can better redress that.
Thank you. And we've just got a couple more questions, and then I think we'll bring this one to a close. But can you say, really importantly, more about us grown-ups and play? I think that was Steve. I've got teenagers now. They're cripplingly embarrassed by my doing anything at all in public. But once upon a time, playing as a family, particularly natural play, was always lovely.
Yeah, keep playing. I can't remember. I'm probably going to get it quote wrong. But it's we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. And you know, one of the things that I always used to get asked is, you know, for adults, how do I start? And the answer was, when did you stop? You know, this the thing. Usually how I start presentations is I ask people to put their hand up if they're a former child. And that was all of us, really. Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
So, and we just forget that. We do forget that. And we just need to get back to the good old plays, as I like to say. You know, loads of stuff. When I start speaking about Kirby, it always opens up a big debate. Well, it wasn't called this there, it was called that there. But the main thing is, a lot of people used to play it, and the games that we all used to play at school, how freely, particularly, we could move as children compared to our children now. It is stark, and it's already biting in terms of not just their physical, but now their mental health, particularly post-pandemic. And we need to do more to redress that blend. This isn't about eliminating the car. This is around redressing that blend to make sure that people are free range, not cars. And that's the issue that we've got at the moment. Cars are free range. People aren't. We're told where to walk, where to sit, where to park. Just not right. We need to have a fundamental rethinking. If we do that through the lens of the child, everything else should fall into place, he said.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit biased.
We hope so. And then one final question, which I think is a really good one. Is anybody working with police forces to push back a growing use of criminal sanction for young people? And they've sort of suggested climbing trees or just existing in public space. But we know that, you know, and certainly in cities and in certain parts of cities, young people, there are these sort of mass kind of orders on young people to kind of curfews and what have you.
Absolutely. One of my personal professional bugbears is the good old PSPO, or the Public Spaces Protection Order. Wherever it is, I managed to get several overturned with different hats on. I used to be at Parkour UK, for those that know what parkour is. So I got several of those turned over, but they are a very blunt tool in terms of that. My other cap, if you like, or hat, I wear a few, is I run the No Ball Games, KNOW Ball Games campaign, which is around getting those signs taken down, and making sure that we return space and place back to our children and young people and stop demonizing just the being children. They should be allowed to play quite freely in our parks, open spaces, and on our streets. And it's incumbent on us as adults to make sure that we facilitate and enable that, not restrict it even further than we have been over the last 4 or 5 decades. And remember that we were once children, and to put that at the forefront of our thinking. But again, please feed this stuff into the inquiry, because even anecdotal stuff or things that you think are trivial, they're not. All of this then starts to tell a narrative around the restrictions, ever-growing restrictions our children have grown up under today.
Great. Oh, well, thank you so much. That was really, really great. Great to hear about all the work you're doing. Really, really great to hear about the inquiry. And I would say, please, everybody, please find some time to take a look at that. And yeah, hopefully you'll join us again, Eugene.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I think we'll move on to our last slot for tonight. We have double speaker tonight. We have Mark. Here he is. I'll let you launch straight into it, Mark.
We're there. Right. Hi, everybody. So this week I'm going to talk about self-explaining streets, layouts, call it what you like. And let's start with something to keep in mind for a few slides in. And as usual, lots of photos. There's a few local klaxons for people to notice. I don't have all the answers, so it's lots of opinions and views tonight. So let's try and blast through these fairly quickly because I've quite a few of them. So let's start with Mark's priority. It's a zebra crossing. Everybody knows it's a zebra crossing. It's very universal. It's culturally adopted across the world. Even in this retail park, even someone there who's designed that can actually get some basics right. We do overcomplicate it, but it is what it is in the UK. So there we go. Even the cheapest, nastiest engineer you can find can manage to paint some stripes in a retail park. Here's the most famous one, or perhaps one of the most famous ones, Abbey Road in Westminster. Again, everybody understands what it is. People are getting photographed. They're probably using it a bit more slowly than they normally would. And believe it or not, this is listed. So there you go. You can list some bleacher beacons and some road paint, which you have to keep repainting somehow. Waltham Forest klaxon number 1. Parallel zebras. I think, again, people who use them generally understand them. Maybe drivers don't. I know there's people on the call here that's done a bit more research than I have. I think the big problem is that the government has singularly failed to bother to publicise them. In the re-released traffic signs for, traffic signs for drivers, or Know Your Traffic signs, whatever it's called, which was updated and released last week, we've finally got parallel zebras explained in there, 6 or 7 years too late. So there you go. Raised entry treatment. So those of you from London will see these absolutely everywhere, but here's one from Suffolk just to make a change. It's contested, this, really, because what the paving and the colours and the layout are showing us is, maybe that's pedestrian priority there, but you've got the curbs going around the corner, you've got the hump markings and yellow paint going around the corner as well. That's telling drivers maybe they've got priority here, despite the highway code, which depends where you are and where you walk, hasn't really filtered through to quite a lot of drivers. So that layout, a bit confusing maybe. Not everybody can be happy with taking control of the space and crossing. Bounce over to Cambridge, the home of cycling in the UK, except they are building this kind of nonsense. This is meant to be footway, cycle track prioritised over what is a very, very small school access with gates that are locked most of the day. And we can't even manage to make that very, very clear. So despite all the tactile paving and everything going on here, we've kind of failed to reinforce that space for walking and cycling going across. Nothing is new under the sun. So here's Walton on the Naze, out in Essex on the coast. Some design priorities. So we've talked about Mark's priority, this absolute design priority here. Continuous footway, that's been there at least 20 years, if not longer. It's not a new thing. We've done it for ages. We've recaptured it more recently, which is all the better. So from a walking point of view, I think most people could understand they've got the priority across there. Tactile paving, which personally I think is a good idea. We've been asked to provide it, and it's been done pretty well here. We can debate these slides forever. Not quite as sure about design priority in a mid-block situation. So here's an example in Hackney. I can't remember who was the most impatient here, whether it was the cyclist or the driver, but in theory, cycle traffic and pedestrian traffic actually have priority here because there's massive giveaway markings painted on the road. Pushing it a bit from a walking point of view, maybe. It's not crossing a side road where people are going ahead of priority. But again, nothing's new in highway design. Here's Bracknell, which has quite a nice actually shared use path network, machine laid. It used to be red, it's probably a lot faded these days. It's probably half design priority, half marked priority, if I'm being honest. But it's there, it's not new. That's been there for 30 years plus. And here you are from another direction. Everybody seems to understand how it all works. Entrance curb, Claxon, back in Coventry, probably that and that aren't too much different, except we've now got entrance curbs, which really push that design priority for those moving ahead at junctions. And let's have a second Waltham Forest Claxon. Design priority and, let's whisper, a bit of unlawful mark priority. The elephant's feet, the square markings there are reserved for parallel zebra crossings and marking the routes for cyclists through junctions where you've got your own traffic signals. So, but these have been in for a long time and they seem to reinforce that people cycling ahead have that priority. Here's an interesting one. So this is Cheapside in the City of London. We've got no entries there except buses and cycles. And if the current consultation goes to plan for the taxi people, they will also get access through there. But in terms of the message we're giving to people, drivers here mainly, does the no entry sign mean a lot more to a lot more people? I don't know. We can debate that one. Here's a sign from the 1960s, 1964 to be precise, that many people claim not to understand. It's in the highway code, know your traffic signs released last week. There's absolutely no excuse from people, I would say. Again, we can debate that sign, but it's been there for a long time. And it's all there for people to understand. Same sign, not really physical filtering. You can drive through there if you want to, down in Lambeth. But actually with the planting and the seating and the bollards and whatnot, this really does shout at you, this is not space for drivers. Done this way really for emergency access. And funnily enough, where you can see that blue fence, that place actually burnt down fairly recently. And lots of conspiracy theories emerged from the local onesies about why all that was. But the point here is, this is a filter that has been designed not to try and encourage people to drive through. It's camera false anyway, so you know it probably does the job of telling people not to get there in the first place, unless you're an emergency vehicle. I would always argue that bollards are far more effective than signs. So even out here in the wilds of Romford, we can put some bollards in that actually tell people you can't drive through there. Really, moped drivers can't go through there because you've got the sign up there. But actually, if they snuck through gently and quietly, I don't think anybody would care. Here's a really weird one. This is a high-speed road, 50 miles an hour, or maybe 40 miles an hour there, but you can't turn left as a driver. So is really that engineering doing the work, or is it the signs there? Nobody's cycling on the A12 as this is to turn left, really. Maybe the signs do have a place in this kind of layout. And here we are from the other side, completely over-designed, really. We don't really need that amount of contraflow for cycling. but it does the job, I guess. I'm not sure if this still exists. I don't know if the politicians got really nervous down in Poole, but when I was there, this was quite a good example of bollards are far more easier to understand than a time plate, unless you read the time plate and not see the bollard. Versus here's a school street, which is just basic pedestrian zone really in legislation. Times on the signs, as you can see there, camera enforced. But what protects more on time closure? This one or this one? I would say bollards every time, but you can't always deploy bollards and have people managing them in this kind of situation. So this must be obvious, mustn't it? You've got some blue signs here, which is, in this example, it's local buses and cycles only. Again, bus gate, that's now in this in the Know Your Traffic Signs guide. It's absolutely hideous. It's completely in your face. I'd imagine people are probably still getting it wrong and driving through. Bus gate's really, really hard to deal with. Of course, it's all been done before. We've got this no entry. Is that better than that blue sign? So there's your blue sign here. Here's no entry. Probably tells a lot more to people that they shouldn't go through there. But down in Bracknell, they've gone one step further. They've actually put in these big sump breakers. So maybe less effective against SUVs these days, but back in the day, if you really decided to disobey the no entry signs, you were going to have oil all over the road there. Some of these on the Cambridge busway, I don't think they're sump breakers. I think they're just pits, and people still ignore the signs and get it wrong. There you go. So I talked about that sign right at the very beginning, which was the no right turn except in 2 stages. That's for cyclists. Here is Mile End Tower Hamlets, TfL Road here. So as a cyclist, if you want to turn right, you're in the left-hand cycle track here. So you have to do it in 2 goes. And so what that sign's telling you to do is when you get the green signal, you carry on forward. So that stripe is this stripe. You have to find yourself the little cycle logo to turn right. Then you have to look way across the junction for the traffic signal to go green for you, just before the traffic who is sitting over there gets released. It's probably more about capacity. It's probably more about this being the main cycle route, but is it really intuitive? And is that position there a particularly nice place to have to wait? I think this is far better. Histon Road in Cambridge. It's a layout which is pretty obvious which way you go, even without the paint, even without the tactiles they've got wrong, and a couple other little points on there, but it guides people around the junction. It's not all about the cyclists, of course. Back to the start here, where I talked about zebra crossings. Here's some marked priority here. Gives a bit of a guidance, bit of a clue to people, maybe where they should cross to get to the island to use the main crossings. Jury's out again a little bit whether we should mark mini zebras or not. I say we do, because on balance, everybody understands what they mean, even if people don't always give way. But cyclists versus pedestrians giving way is a whole different lecture. So that's me for this week, and in fact for this year. So Merry Christmas, everybody. I shall stop sharing.
Oh, my goodness, we're not even into December. Roxanne's already shown us a photograph of her Christmas tree. But very nice.
And I can't work out how to stop sharing. That's good, isn't it?
Let's see if I can boot you off.
Boot me off, yeah.
I can actually.
Yay, there we go.
Okay, we're back. Brilliant. Thank you very much. If anybody has any burning questions for Mark, I'll take 2 questions. I was just going to ask you though, the whole business with signing no entry or signing kind of positively or negatively, like how do people choose, or is it just up to the individual engineer?
Ooh, it's very precisely controlled, so you've got to get the books out and double check.
So if you've got a bus gate, if you've got 2 bus gates, why would they be signed differently?
So one's a bus gate, one's not a bus gate. So a bus gate will have the blue sign and the letters bus gate on the ground. The no entry version was a no entry except buses. It's a different traffic order, a different part of legislation. Yeah.
You can see why everything is such a mess and people don't understand though, can't you? And and I think that the fact that some of these designs that we kind of think now this is a really good solution that you can see all over the place, and I just you wonder how that
I do have sympathy with people getting it wrong. I know people say, "Oh, read the sign, it's fine." I have some sympathy. I think the layout is more important than the signs, maybe.
Yeah. No, I agree. Matthew's got his hand up. I'll take your question.
Yeah, cheers, Mark. Great to see that present. So we've got one street in the town centre of Darlington. It's one way to motor vehicles, two way for pedestrians and cyclists, and it's got a bit of a T junction. So one end's got a no left turn painted on the road in a roundel. The other end has the no flowing motorbikes with a time plate, and the other end has a no entry sign. Only one of those signs is backed up by a bollard. I'd like to get offer no prizes for which one isn't abused on a regular basis by motorists. It's the one with the bollard. The other ones, we see traffic reversing the full length wrong way or just blatantly driving the wrong way. The no left turn might as well be invisible paint. Bollards all the time, and I am a member of the World Bollards Association, so there we are, full disclosure.
Thank you, Matthew. Does anybody else have a question? One more question, otherwise we're going to finish up. No, right, I'm going to move on then because I see no hands. Thank you, Mark. That was really, really interesting. And yeah, it would be great to see so much more that was not just signs, but better road layouts. So just to draw things to a close, thanks to Eugene again, thanks to Mark, thank you all for coming. Next week we have Lucy Saunders, who's going to update us on the latest on the Healthy Streets approach that she's developed. That's now fairly widely adopted, certainly in London it's used, and actually by campaigners, often campaigning either under a Healthy Streets banner or for a Healthy Streets approach. So it should be a great session. And so we look forward to seeing you next week. And then I think we have one more after that, and then we finish for the Christmas break. But we'll tell you a bit more about that next week. Right, hope everyone has a good week. Thanks for joining.